parents here in? Or in disguise? All of them, or the moms, the dads?
3 out of 4.
Okay.
Not one more! 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 NRA has got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! NRA has got to go!
And I can see people already.
Enough is enough! Enough is enough! Enough is enough!
Deadheads and suckers, how can you live? How can you live? Tell me, how can you live? Deadheads and suckers, how can you live? When good folks are dying every day. When good kids are dying every day. Deadheads and suckers, how can...
Sensibility.
Incredible.
Crosse out here has an experience.
Keep him up. Wave him.
I was asked to speak today because I'm a pastor, and so I think I'm theologically qualified to say thoughts and prayers are not enough. Action is needed. I'm a gun owner, and the NRA does not speak for me. If you are a hunter here today or a gun owner, does the NRA speak for you? No! And they like to claim that voice. The NRA is only a small group of people in this country wielding far too much power. As a hunter, one thing that I know is this: guns have one purpose: killing. Any other reason people give you is a lie. A gun is designed to kill. And with that comes an enormous responsibility. I could not imagine what insanity it takes to think we should be arming our teachers. An active shooter situation is more stressful than anything I could possibly imagine. I am not trained as a soldier or a police officer. I haven't undergone hundreds of hours of training with a weapon to know what to do in that situation. And any coward of a president who would say that he would just run in with a gun, that's an idiot statement for somebody who doesn't know the power of firearms. But Pastor Ben, you say, the Second Amendment isn't about hunting. And I'll say you're right. The Second Amendment wasn't written for hunting rights. But the Second Amendment begins like this: a well-regulated militia. There is nothing well-regulated about being able to buy an AR-15 in less than 15 minutes on the internet. There is nothing well-regulated. There is nothing well-regulated about being able to buy a bump stock and turn it into a fully automatic weapon.
Our communities, improving our quality of life is not a spectator sport. We can't sit on the sidelines, right? We have to get involved, and that's why today is so great, and it's so great to see you here getting involved with your actions and your deeds. We know that that's what makes lacrosse great. And you have to appreciate the march of our lives, because that's what is all about, our actions and making a difference. We're lucky to live here in lacrosse because we have so many people who care and who demonstrate through those actions and words and efforts that we can all make lacrosse a truly great, kind, and compassionate place. So thank you. Thank you for being here. I'd like to read a proclamation by the mayor of the city of La Crosse. Whereas March for Our Lives is created by, inspired by, and led by students across the country who will no longer risk their lives waiting for someone else to take action to stop the epidemic of mass school shootings. And in the tragic wake of the 17 lives brutally cut short in Parkland, Florida, politicians are telling us that now is not the time to talk about guns. It is time. March for Our Lives believes the time is now to change our country's conversation about gun violence. Election day is also a time. So for those politicians who don't share our values of kindness and compassion, use your right during Election Day. Whereas the mission and focus of March for Our Lives is to demand that a comprehensive and effective bill be immediately brought before Congress to address these issues. Now, therefore, I, Tim Kabat, Mayor of the City of La Crosse, do hereby proclaim March 24th as March for Our Lives Day in the City of La Crosse and urge everyone to stand together by refusing to allow one more senseless death due to gun violence. Thank you.
As a future teacher, I'm terrified. Terrified for my life, terrified for my innocent students, and terrified for my fellow teachers who dedicate each and every day of their lives to help their students grow. As an aunt to 2 little boys and a cousin to 2 school-age girls, I'm terrified. Terrified for their lives, terrified for their love of learning, terrified that their anxiety will boil up inside of them due to the never-ending notion that their learning could be violently disrupted. As a possible future mother, I'm terrified. Terrified for the lives of my future children. Terrified that a place that should be absolutely safe for them turns into a nightmare. Terrified to bring children into a world where the rights of gun owners are far more important than their lives. As an American citizen, I'm terrified. Terrified for the lives of the people I have never met. Terrified for the future of our education system. Terrified that our government is so infatuated with money and power that they neglect the safety and lives of their neighbors.
It's for reducing gun violence in our schools and in our communities. So let us pray, but let us also be sure to work toward ending gun violence. Let us be willing to be brothers and sisters to one another. Thank you.
Alyssa Aladif, Scott Beagle, Martin Duque Anguiano, Nicholas Dworet, Aaron Feiss, Jamie Gutenberg, Chris Hickson, Luke Hoyer, Kara Luran, Gina Montalto, Joaquin Oliver, Elena Petty, Meadow Pollock, Helena Ramsey, Alex Schachter, Carmen Shentrup, Peter Wang. These are the names of the 17 students and staff killed in the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas shooting on February 14th. I could spend the next 5 minutes naming victims of Columbine, Sandy Hook, Aurora, and the many other school shootings that have occurred in recent years, names we promised never to forget. Instead, I am here to ask what is being done so that this long list stops growing. I am here to ask what is being done so that I am not next. I could speak for hours about the fear I feel walking into school every day, the scenarios I run through every night planning my escape routes from each of the classrooms I learn in, the thoughts that plague me as I imagine what the world would be like if a shooter entered my school. But my feelings, nor thoughts and prayers are enough. So instead, I am here today to demand action so that students like myself can forget these worries and focus on their education. There are 3 specific actions that I ask for. 1, I ask that Congress fund the Center for Disease Control to research gun violence. I recently attended a public health lecture at Harvard University while visiting the college and was exposed to the shocking truth that research on gun violence is prohibited by the Dickey Amendment. For other serious public health epidemics, such as automobile accidents, data has been the deciding factor to drive interventions aimed to reduce injury and death. For example, it was found that 16-year-olds were often involved in accidents when there were other teens in the car. Thus, GDL restrictions were placed on newly licensed drivers and serious accident rates significantly fell. Regarding gun violence, lawmakers don't know what the right solution is because there is not enough information. Data is a nonpartisan issue, and thus the CDC must be fully funded to research gun violence. 2, I ask that teachers are not armed with guns, but instead that schools are armed with better safety measures such as metal detectors, stricter dress codes, and more security cameras. Every single teacher I have spoken with on this proposed issue has stated their immense concern regarding the idea of arming teachers. Teachers enter their field to educate, and to change the lives of students, not to become trained marksmen. I am personally terrified about the thousands of accidents which will surely follow if teachers are encouraged to bring guns to school. Please don't turn my learning environment into a war zone or a prison. Instead, keep the guns out. 3, I ask that loopholes in background check laws be firmly closed. Closing loopholes is massively supported across the country. Over 97% of voters support this type of legislation, so why isn't it being done everywhere? In states where these laws are put in place, such as Connecticut, gun homicide has dropped by as much as 22%. I ask the excuses end and the action begins.
My name is Richard Breaux. I'm a professor of American History and Ethnic Studies, but more importantly, I'm a person whose life has been directly affected by gun violence. The tangled, complex, and contradictory history of gun ownership, gun rights, racism, and race relations is too complicated to explain in a few minutes. But I understand the recent campaigns by the NRA to encourage gun ownership by middle-class and upper-middle-class African Americans is not about liberating Black people from oppression or our Second Amendment rights. It is about cashing in on a culture that criminalizes Black, poor, and working-class people. It is about cashing in on a racist political history where when people like Robert Williams or the Deacons for Defense or Justice or the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense began to arm themselves in the face of police brutality and government harassment, California scrapped its open carry laws, passed the Mulford Act of 1967, and the federal government passed the 1968 gun control law. The NRA is the lobbying arm of the gun manufacturing industry. It does not care about your, my, or anyone else's constitutional rights. It cares about making money and making profit.
Hello, my name is Bevan, and I am a junior at the project-based high school here in La Crosse. And so I serve a role as a student, but today I'm going to be giving a history lesson. 164 years ago, in 1853, a man named William Butler was shot. He was the principal teacher at the Louisville High School in Louisville, Kentucky. This was the first high-profile shooting in the United States. When the shooter was acquitted, there was protest across the nation. It is 2018, almost 18 years since I was born. There have been 10 school mass shootings resulting in 122 deaths. And I may be young, but I know if we don't do something now, I will not be alive long enough to see what happens next if we wait another 164 years.
I am honored to introduce Libby Miller, a junior, I believe, at Logan High School.
Hi everybody, thank you for coming. It just makes me really happy to see so many people have come to support this issue. 17 children and staff members at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School won't go home tonight. They will never again see their families. These prospective kids will no longer be able to go to college or travel the world, or fulfill any dreams that they once had in mind. In an instance, their futures were gone. As of today, there have been over 200 school shootings nationwide since the mass shooting at Columbine High School on April 20th of 1999. On April 28th, 1996, Australia suffered the loss of 35 lives due to a mass shooting at a seaside resort. In just 12 days, their government changed the policy of gun control laws to make them stricter, requiring both individual registration of a weapon and a genuine reason for needing one in the first place. Over 90% of nationwide public support was present, and the result, it has been 22 years, and not one mass shooting has been accounted for in the country of Australia.
I am fed up that our elected officials are willing to allow the gun lobby to put their Second Amendment right before the rights of our young people to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I call BS. I am livid that people are buying into the suggestion by the NRA that the way to protect our students is to arm our teachers. I call BS. If a gunman can walk onto an army base like Fort Hood with highly trained personnel and still kill 13 people, do you really believe that arming 20% of teachers is going to stop the next killer with an AR-15? I call BS.
Is that when a gun is present in a domestic violence scenario, women are 5 times more likely to die. That is the cost of guns in our community, and we have had enough, and we will take no more. On April 3rd, there's a referendum question on your ballot. Make sure that you are voting yes to get the money out of politics, because you know damn good and well who benefits the most. Folks like the NRA are the ones who want money to stay in politics, right? We have had enough, and we will take no more.
I'm ready for the letters, the calls, the emails, the text messages. I know what I'm going to hear. Bishop, haven't you heard of the separation of church and state? Bishop, stay in the pulpit, stay out of the park. Bishop, you need to be serving Jesus. My responses are ready. I serve Jesus as a bishop in a church body that has chosen to be a public church, to speak for those in need, to protect the innocent. Today I speak for the innocents who are no longer safe in our schools. No civilian needs to own an assault rifle. Our students are meant to live. There are politicians who say what we really need is better mental health care. They're right, and I hope they're willing to pay for it. But I've worked in adolescent psychiatric care. I know things do not change quickly. And while we're working for it, can we at least get rid of the guns? No civilian needs to own an assault rifle, and our students are meant to live.
Schools have installed cameras and entrances have been locked, so visitors are buzzed through the office. Our students and our schools have done their part. It's past time for us to do our part. It is past time for elected officials to be bold, to have backbone, and to respond to school safety and gun safety in a common sense way that people are expecting. To stand up to self-interested groups like the NRA.
So first, let me tell you, on behalf of the Franciscan Sisters of Perpetual Adoration, we hear you, we are praying for you, and we are standing with you. Just so you know, when we were marching over here, we had sisters in that march, but some of our sisters are elderly and couldn't make it. They chose to stand out in front of the convent, holding up their signs and showing the world we care. We are so fortunate. We are so blessed to have our young brothers and sisters rising up and saying, enough is enough. We want to live. We need to listen to those brothers and sisters. We need to follow their example. We need to go and tell the politicians, we need to remind the NRA that guns are not our brothers and sisters, people are. We need to support one another.
So I just got word that all of our petitions have been signed, and we have no more copies because we have over 800 signatures just from today. Thank you for showing up, Lacrosse. This is incredible.
Teachers don't want guns in schools. The answer to violence in our schools and our communities is never more violence. So I came up with a list of what we do want. Number one, we want our children and our communities to be safe. Number two, we want our schools and our communities to have the resources that we need. Number three, and I'm glad we have some legislators here today. We want our legislators, our governor, and our president to listen to us instead of listening to the corporate lobbyist masters. Number four, we want our government to fulfill its most basic promises, to protect the innocent and the powerless from the powerful and the violent, to create a fair and just society in which all of us can contribute and benefit, not just the powerful elite. We can and we must create a better society.
But I can tell you, mental health does not discriminate. It is not just a problem in the US. It is a worldwide crisis. And yet, the US has the most significant gun violence issue than any country. So this only leads to one conclusion. We have dropped the ball on common sense gun laws in this country. Mental health continues to be used as a scapegoat on this important issue. When we frame the conversation about gun violence in the context of mental illness, we are doing a disservice to the victims, and we are unfairly stigmatizing the millions of Americans who suffer from mental health.
Good afternoon. A good history undermines beliefs often held by political partisans, such is the case with the NRA and their propaganda that emphasizes the Second Amendment with absolute individual rights, gun ownership. The founders' emphasis was on militias, not rights. Moreover, it's common sense that gun laws were passed to ensure public safety. They were prevalent in the 13 colonies and in the states when the new nation was formed. The position of absolute constitutional rights provides cover for the NRA's real purpose. They are a shill for gun makers. Whenever the NRA warns gun owners that the Second Amendment is under attack, it stokes fears that increase the sales and profits of their gun manufacturing friends. In return, gun manufacturers generously reward the NRA with vital.
The leading case on this is DC versus Heller. It was a 5-4 decision with Justice Scalia writing the decision. The facts were that the District of Columbia had enacted a law prohibiting individuals from owning handguns, and it required that any legally owned handguns be kept unloaded and disassembled. It was the perfect factual case to go to the Supreme Court for gun right activists. Everything was fine. And Heller was a licensed special police officer for the District of Columbia. He appealed, and in a 64-page opinion, the Supreme Court reversed itself and held that the Second Amendment did protect individuals' rights to possess arms, and to use arms for self-defense, particularly inside their home. It specified this new individual right to possess arms, and you may not like that, but it is the law of the land. But it wasn't unlimited right to bear arms. And I'm going to quote Justice Scalia. Like most rights, the Second Amendment right is not unlimited. It is not a right to keep and carry any weapon whatsoever, in any manner whatsoever, or for whatever purpose.
Not one more! 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 Not one more!
The American Academy of Pediatrics, which I'm a member of for 35 years, has recently announced that it will promote research $500,000 into an understanding of gun violence and gun risk to children. At the same time, the Academy recommends that we ask our federal government to finance 100 times that amount, $50 million, to the CDC to do this research. At the same time, the president of the Academy has recommended to all pediatricians to involve themselves with events like today, for the reason I'm here as well. Secondly, we can do this, and the reason I say that, as a pediatrician, I know that 100 years ago it was not uncommon for families to lose their children before they get to adulthood. It was part of life. Our great-grandparents will remember that as their active memory. And what has happened since 100 years ago to today, when childhood death for a family is rare? What has happened is we have made policy changes, we have made discoveries, we have researched to the point that when we have disease, we study disease and we provide preventive care. When we have risk to children because of intoxication, we separate the risk from the children so that they can grow up safe. When there are dangerous things and risks for accidents in our communities, we separate those risks from children. We make safe roads. We make safe regulations. And today, children can grow up healthily, and the experience of death is rare. This has been done. It has been done by our great-grandparents, our grandparents, and our parents. And if they can do it, we can do it. We can make a future for our children.
Got the guy shot from the hotel. I don't care how many guns anybody those people would have had. You can't shoot back in a concert venue with somebody shooting from a high building. It was in a nightclub in Orlando. That wasn't a school. It was in a church in Texas. We cannot just harden our schools. When we harden our schools, when we harden our churches, when we harden our concert venues, we can't harden everywhere. Because when we harden those places, you could say we harden our hearts. It's no coincidence that students stood up after women stood up. Me too. After African Americans and people of color stood up because Black Lives Matter. The entire issue of gun violence is symptomatic. As a doctor, I could say maybe there's a disease infecting our country of hate.
But they are the winds of change. They're coming in every direction and they're blowing across this country. I hear your call for universal background checks. I hear your call for mandatory waiting periods. I hear your call for raising the age to purchase semi-automatic weapons and firearms to 21. I hear your call for a ban on bump stocks and assault weapons. I hear your call for stronger mental health services for individuals and the funds to pay for it. These are reasonable, common sense measures that the public supports. We must work to make sure our elected officials support these measures too.
And if not, they will feel the consequences of the electorate at the ballot box. If we can't change their minds, we will change the faces. And the timing couldn't be better with an election in spring, in April, and I voted yesterday, and an election in November. It's the Supreme Court this spring, the governor and attorney general and legislative offices in November, and be known that our attorney general is on record of supporting arming teachers. Just yesterday, Senate Majority Leader Fitzgerald called legislation on background checks dead in the Senate. He is clearly tone deaf on the need to act on this long overdue reform, and I hope Wisconsin calls him. The youth of today have brought us all here to this moment, a moment supported by families, adults, parents, survivors, and victims. The charge is never again, and enough is enough. Just think, only 6 weeks ago, those students of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School were just that, school students, high school students. They were living a pretty typical life, I imagine, when on Valentine's Day, their lives changed forever. They buried their classmates and their teachers. They organized. They held a vigil, a town hall meeting. They did marches. They did interviews. They lit up the social media world. They met with lawmakers. They met with federal lawmakers. They organized today's march in Washington, D.C., and sister marches are happening all over America. They have not had time to heal, but they march on. It is how they cope. If they can be that brave, that courageous, that focused, that articulate, that persistent, that move to demand change, then we should expect no less from our lawmakers. Today we march for our lives. Today we march for our loved ones. Today we march for our communities. Today we march for change. Thank you so much for everybody for being in this moment and growing this movement onward, upward, and forward together. Thank you.
And I want to speak especially to you. The House of Bishops said we as bishops are to follow your lead. The reason for that is what we do as adults doesn't work. That is not a joke. This is the truth. In Florida, in Parkland, those students came to Tallahassee, and that legislature and that governor signed, yes, it's not enough, but it was a lot. And it was a beginning. Real change has taken place in that state. And there's a reason for it. When I talk, or other adults talk, the legislatures, the lawmakers are receiving this as cognitive. It is theoretical. When you talk, it's experiential. Those Parkland students had experienced gun violence. And one of the things people are wondering about is what's going to happen after today. I don't believe they listen to the adults, but they will listen to you because you go through active shooter drills constantly. I have 3 children. One is 26. The others are 32 and 30. They have never gone through gun drills like you do. What I would like to see for you to do is to petition lawmakers of both parties, petition the governor of the state of Wisconsin to come and participate with you in active shooter drills, not as an observer, but as a participant. I would like to see them do it at 3 levels: elementary school, middle school, high school. I would like Governor Walker to have to curl up in the turtle position next to a 7-year-old. What will happen is they will experience this as you do. They will see gun violence through your eyes, and it will change their hearts.
We march with members of our community and survivors of every form of gun violence because there is no such thing as too soon to talk about gun violence. There is only too late. Thoughts and prayers alone are not enough. We must demand action to end gun violence. We are honored to be following the lead of our nation's youth. We are marching alongside these incredible students and our entire community in hopes that we can create lasting change so that our families can live without fear of gun violence. We march to send a strong message to our nation's leaders in Washington, in state houses, and in corporate boardrooms across the country, that we will not stand idly by while our safety, the safety of our families, and the safety of our communities is put at risk by a dangerous gun lobby agenda. Ignoring our nation's people isn't working. They're demanding safer gun laws, and we're demanding safer gun laws. And we'll be there every step of the way to send that message. It is a time to march for our lives, not just today, but from here on out. Keep this momentum going. Pressure lawmakers and our nation's leaders to make safer gun laws and support universal background checks. Use your vote as your voice, please. It is time to change our country's conversation about gun violence. Whether you're Republican, Democrat, own guns, don't own guns, pro-Second Amendment, against the Second Amendment, we can all agree that our children should be safer. We will make history, and we will make America safe again. Thank you. Thank you.